Welcome to Rising Up for Justice, a special weekly series presented by Rising Up with Sonali, an independently produced subscriber-supported program syndicated to radio stations, free speech TV, and podcast platforms. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer. Our nation and our world are overrun by billionaires and bigots, but they are few and we are many. On this series, exclusive to subscribers of Rising Up with Sonali and viewers of Free Speech TV, you'll hear conversations with change makers in the movements for social justice, and we'll dig into the nuts and bolts of values, strategies, tactics, narratives, and building power. This week on Rising Up for Justice, I'm joined by Emmy Scott, Executive Director of Earth Guardians, a global organization powering young leaders to catalyze resources for resilient climate solutions. Emmy was recognized as the WWF 2025 Youth Conservation Leader of the Year. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, begin by telling us more about Earth Guardians. I explained, climate solutions as a big part of it, but this is a youth-led organization. What exactly is Earth Guardians? What are your main goals?
Yes, we're a 501(c)(3) that works internationally, and we are youth-led, but we are for the youth as well. So we are powering youth-led place-based solutions across 40 plus countries with a network of over 1,000 students. And we're giving them the tools to be able to make change happen in the communities that they know are important for their livelihoods, for their contribution, the way that they can uniquely contribute to the environmental movement. And so we act as an on-ramp, but also an ongoing ecosystem for people to find their place within this movement.
And why specifically young people? Why are young people so important to this issue of climate?
Yes, young people, Gen Z in particular, is one of the largest generations to have ever existed, honestly, in history. That's a lot of studies show that. And so it's really important that we're engaging young people, but Gen Z in particular, because our influence is massive, politically, economically, culturally. And so young people being the driving force of the future, being the inheritors of the future is why we are targeting young people and focused on young people.
Indigenous young people, especially, and young people of color, this is also a focus. Is that largely because, of course, when we look globally, that's the majority, right? But is it also because that's primarily who are often paying the highest price for climate change?
Majority, we focus on BIPOC and young people because they are the majority impacted, but also because we're the ones with the most creative solutions. Oftentimes, young people are coming into this movement, and especially young people of color, we're on the front lines experiencing the change every single day. And with that experience mixed with some hard and soft skills of traditional, modern, and ecological knowledge, right? So traditional ecological knowledge of the past, but also some modern hard and soft skills that we can utilize today to build systems and create a place where our innovation, our ideas, our passions, and interests mix with structure. And that is why we are focused on people of color on the front lines and young people, because most passionate, most engaged, most affected, but also the ones with the most opportunity and creativity to bring to solutions.
What are the main countries and regions of the world that Earth Guardians operates?
So we're in 40 different countries, and it's really hard for me to remember all of the different countries. But we are working across the major continents. And so right now, our work is mostly concentrated in Africa, and that being in Togo, Sierra Leone, and yeah, that'd be our main areas of activity. And we also have our Indigenous Youth Initiative that works out in North America here in Turtle Island. And so we work with 20 different tribes across the US. And together there, we bring them for an annual training. And with that training, they create projects that they bring back to their communities to implement.
So, Indigenous youth here in the United States, which of course is relevant to us since both of us are speaking from the US, let's talk about how Earth Guardians goes about achieving its aims. So, the idea is that young people, especially young people of color, Indigenous people, can be leaders and have very creative solutions. What does that look like on the ground? Give me some examples of how that's actually playing out.
Yeah, so our one of my favorite projects is our Sierra Leone crew. They imagined about 2 or 3 years ago what it would be like to reforest their community and not just reforest the community, but create an economic system, a new regenerative economic system for all of their community members. So that way they didn't have to rely on deforestation in the future and they could create a sustainable project for the long term. So they ideated this about 3 years ago. And we've since then been able to reforest over 150,000 trees in Sierra Leone and implement over 300 beehives. And they're utilizing those beehives to create honey production. So that way they can rely less on deforestation and more on the regenerative production of honey.
And is it through trainings? Is it through working with governments? What are the ways in which Earth Guardians kind of links people with the resources that they need?
Yeah, so at Earth Guardians, we provide the youth with training curriculum that is this combination of traditional ecological modern skills. And so with the training, we give them training and mentorship, and they take that skills and those knowledge and be able to they create partnerships in their community. So it looks very different crew to crew, looks very different for each young person, um, and depending on the project. So if the project is one that is to scale where they need the government involved, we help provide the mentorship and the resources to be able to mobilize their community as well as advocate to their government to be partners. So last year in 2025, we actually had over 411 local government partners and businesses with our crews. But we have other crews who, these are ones that are working at some larger capacities, but we also have students who work as individuals. And so what that might look like on the ground would be a young person who is starting a garden in their backyard. We have a crew in Brazil that one individual decided to start a backyard garden, and then they inspired their community to do the same. And it wasn't that they were necessarily partnering with other community members to help them. They were really just showcasing what they did in in their own garden, and that inspired the community to start 20 more gardens on their own as well. So they were catalyzing change.
And then when you think about the connections that are made between other young people, what about the connections between generations? Do you find that having young people do this work and taking the lead on it pulls older generations, who have unfortunately, in very reductionist, generalized terms, have dropped the ball, right? Like us older people have not ensured proper, ensured our kids' futures, if you will. So does this work inspire older generations? Is there a linking between generations happening?
Yes, intergenerational connection is very important to our work. And I appreciate you saying a generalized statement because I have a lot of empathy for the older generations. I really do think that people do the best that they can with what they have in the moment. Um, and we have a lot more insight now than we did in the past. And that is a great responsibility. Um, and so intergenerational connection, I think, is something that we really pride at Earth Guardians. We know we can't do this work alone with just young people taking the lead. And so what we like to emphasize is young people leading with intergenerational connection as a support, as mentors. It's really important that batons are getting passed, that knowledge is getting passed down, that, seats and positions of power are being passed to the next generation, as well as the experience, right? So I really appreciate when the older generation is willing to allow us into the rooms to watch what they do, to absorb what went wrong, the challenges that they've come across, the solutions that they know might work really well because they've experienced them, or things that they know just don't because they've come across those challenges, and not utilizing the guidance as roadblocks, but truly just a way to not have us recreate the wheel or have to pave our own paths, but have these paths that have been paved out for us get a little more easier to obtain every generation. So
When
young people leading with old people supporting is very important.
when was Earth Guardians founded? Give me the history of the organization. I know that it has its origins in Maui.
Yes, Earth Guardians was founded in 1992 by Tamara Roski. She was the founder of Earth Guardians, an incredible mother of some indigenous leaders who are still creating incredible movement to this day. Scott Martinez is one of her sons, and he is an incredible musician. And it's such an honor that they created this structure and created these pathways for us Earth Guardians. And I
I
was actually
interviewed him when he was like 14, I think.
really, that's
Yes.
incredible. Oh my gosh, yes, he is great, such an inspiration and a major pillar to the work that we're doing. Um, and yeah, I was a program participant when I was 17 years old, so I'm now 26, and so a couple of no, not as a handful of years ago now. It's getting larger and larger how long ago that was. But when I was 17 years old, I started my journey with Earth Guardians, and it was incredible learning about the history of Earth Guardians getting their start with the lawsuit, well, the start in Maui and being honored, um, the children's torch and then moving forward, fast forwarding to a
Are,
couple
are
of
you
years.
are you referencing the lawsuit around our Children's
Yes,
Trust?
that's why I was
Right.
fast
Yeah.
forwarding to a couple of years later because
Ah.
that was the start in Maui. They were gifted by the Dalai Lama the Children's Torture Trust. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. But then fast forward to 2016, around that time period when I was getting involved with Earth Guardians, the Juliana lawsuits were happening and really put Earth Guardians on the map, as well as started the cruise program that now is the heartship of what we do here at Earth Guardians. That's
And
where
and tell me a little bit more about that, the Juliana lawsuits and this program that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so the Juliana lawsuits, the Juliana versus the US was a group of students that are suing the US for the effects of the climate crisis. It's still an ongoing lawsuit, and so there hasn't been any final settlements yet, but are more than a handful of those plaintiffs are Earth Guardians. And that plus Standing Rock happening, because the Standing Rock movement was also around the same time period. There was just young people on the ground mobilizing in such incredible mass and force and creating um, catalyzing a lot of change. They were inspiring so many other young people to do similar actions. And so the cruise program was inspired and born from that, was from how young people are able to catalyze their communities and not only lead such creative solutions, but also inspire other people from all walks of life, from all ages, to get involved alongside of them. So.
And I believe that the Juliana lawsuit is it hit a bit of a wall with the Supreme Court, but there's still ongoing appeal that needs to be done. And the idea, I remember when it first happened, when news of it first came about, the idea was that young people was saying that we've been deprived of our constitutional right to a safe future, to safety, to have our future, have some guarantee that we have a future. Let me ask you about the obstacles that you face. Obviously, the legal system is a bit of an obstacle, as those lawsuits showed. It should have been a straightforward lawsuit,
Mhm.
but the fossil fuel companies are very powerful and very, very rich. What are the main obstacles that Earth Guardians faces in your work, not only here in North America, but globally?
I'll start with the North America perspective and then perhaps span out from there. Specifically in North America, we face challenges with disengagement, and we believe that disengagement is coming from when I say disengagement, that is people wanting to, get involved in the movement and contribute in a meaningful way. And we see this coming from misinformation on the internet, divisiveness, um, this polarization that is happening in our political sphere. It's really creating nature to be a movement that, for almost my entire life has been very political when it shouldn't be. Nature should be nonpartisan. And so I would say that was one of our biggest challenges that we face is feeling like there is an us versus them within this movement when nature affects all of us. And it's really important that we all play a role, especially when we're talking about, the top 50 companies and billionaires that are out there. As unfortunate as it is, they play a role in this. They make a huge influence, as we know, right? And so, as much power as an individual has, as much power as we can take back and claim for ourselves, it's up to them to also do the same thing. It's up to every single one of us to reclaim our power as individuals and come together for the collective. Um, so I would say that is a big hurdle that we face globally, as well as recognizing our individual power that plays a role in the larger collective. And that comes with resourcing, right? So a lot of times people underestimate how much they might be able to give with their time, with their money, um, and with their passions and their interests, how their special passions and interests might be able to play a unique role in contributing to solutions. Um, so yeah, I would say that is a big hurdle, and that really has to do, and the bigger scheme of things is that the people that are at the top, the trickling down, we know is not happening with resources. And so instead of waiting for the trickling down to happen, we need to reimagine what it could look like for us to create those seats at the table, to create those resources for ourselves, and then perhaps invite those at the top into the movement to do the same, to actually give their part.
Do you find also that the perpetrators of climate change are large companies, but of course they are enabled by the governments of wealthy nations? Those two work in tandem. And as a global organization, do you find that there's a difference between how those of us working, with those of us working under governments that are part of the problem have to work differently than those who are working in places where they're bearing the brunt and not necessarily contributing as much to the problem? They're disproportionately the victims, while we here in North America or in the West are disproportionately part of the problem.
Hmm. Yes, yes, it's one of the messages that I often give when, depending on what context and audience I'm speaking to, is, if I'm speaking to those on the front line, I often express how important it is for us to rest and to have joy and find inspiration in this work. Not, we have to accept the heavy feelings that are so real because of how tragic everything that we're dealing with is. And in that acceptance, we have to find moments of caring for ourselves and taking time to take breaks and all of the good things that just really refresh our bodies, refresh our minds, our souls, and our hearts. And then when I'm speaking in a context to others who um, maybe take that rest on a little more often than not. And I don't like to use the word rest for them, right? Because it's exactly what you're speaking to, the ones that are disproportionately affecting the climate crisis, and are playing an influence in it. The message I like to give to them is to challenge themselves to really think about the role they're playing. And especially here in America, we have such a powerful influence with our economy, with the way that we vote, with our dollar, the way that we vote in our local elections. Um, and so, with that democracy, I try to challenge people to be very real about their actions and how that might affect others, and to try to just be more aware. Awareness is the first start, and then taking action is the next step. So.
How do you deal with the frustration that this is an issue that people have been screaming about for decades, and that had action been taken decades ago, we wouldn't be in this place today where there are wildfires burning and destroying people's homes, where the waters are warming everywhere, and where we are just seeing these record-breaking heat waves. It was such a predictable outcome of inaction. And Standing Rock happened, which you referenced, and it felt like there was momentum after that. And now we're back to a place where climate change doesn't even figure into the national conversation, except from the powers that be, who try to deny that it's even real. And yet, of course, the public agrees that it's real because they see it and they feel it. There's this growing disconnect, it seems, between those who have the power to change things and the actual reality of things.
Yeah. One of the first ways that I deal with that frustration is really leaning into community, into local solutions. And so it is what you've said is resonates so much. And when I'm implementing local solutions, I gain this sense of agency where I'm able to remind myself of my power. I'm able to remind myself of, how sometimes the the world has honestly, in a way, been on and off like this. And I say this with a grain of salt. But the second way that I cope with the frustration is learning history and looking back at historical context. Um, and unfortunately, the powers to be, as you mentioned, this is very intentional. It's by design. Back in the 70s and 80s, almost 83%, if not more, of Americans agreed that nature solutions were a top concern for them, for their future. And since then, I think we're now sitting at a rate of like maybe less than 30% of Americans consider it to be a top concern. And this is by design. And so while that is frustrating to know, it is also, there's opportunity, and it's inspiring in a way because there's a playbook that we can learn, and we can learn how to overcome. And we have before. Humans are super resilient. Another great part about learning history is that we've been in potentially much worse positions. And I say potentially only because that's up to the person who is everybody's perspective, right? But when you look back at history, humanity has been in much worse positions. And so we're making progress, and I know it feels like we're regressing. But that's when I lean back into local community, because when we lean into local solutions, we realize that there are so much opportunity there. And as the system honestly kind of crashes itself, it's coming up to a peak of maturity, and everything that matures does just naturally die. And as it dies, there will be solutions on the ground in local communities that will have structure and will be ready to take its place.
How does your organization center storytelling and narrative in your work? Because as you and I are talking, it seems as though, of course, that is such a critical part of it, not only in spreading the word that climate change is real, but in the fact that we can do something about it, and linking folks to one another, telling the story of what has fueled climate change and what can address climate change. Is that an issue? Is that a focus for Earth Guardians?
Yes, yeah. We focus on storytelling. Storytelling is honestly a very powerful tool. So we focus on storytelling to help drive our mission, and also to be able to catalyze and inspire others. But particularly, we have been focused this year on how does our storytelling help bridge the divide and create less divisiveness and more solutions.
Are there ways in which you deploy particular storytelling? You mean social media, music, documentaries? What are some of those forms?
Yeah, we're leaning into social media at the moment. Documentaries is an incredible way for us to do the storytelling, but especially art. So we have a few trainings and really empower our students to tell their stories on the ground from their perspectives in the art form that feels most authentic to them. And so we get stories from all different types of mediums that we are trying to find ways to present on the social media. It's can sometimes be hard to take something in person and so tangible and real and then digitalize it and be able to show the rest of the world. But it is really inspiring, the art and the stories that are coming from the communities on the ground, from our crews and our young leaders.
And what are ways in which people can connect with Earth Guardian's work? If there are young folks who are listening right now, or parents or loved ones of young people who feel that this would be a good place for them to connect up with, how can people engage?
We would love to have everyone a part of our ecosystem. The best way to engage is to follow us on social media, connect to our newsletter, to share our story as we share it. The next best way is for a young person to join our cruise program. You can join our cruise program at www.earthguardians.org. You get signed up and do an onboarding, and from there you'll have access to our training and ongoing mentorship. We have regional mentors, so you'll have a mentor who can help tailor resources specifically for your region as well. And the third best way to stay connected to Earth Guardians and to support this work is to donate, to give directly to the young people on the ground, to our ecosystem. We are currently fundraising for our 35th anniversary. So our 35th anniversary is coming up in 2027. And so we have not launched official plans for that yet. So this will be one of the first places that I share this information. But we were looking for people to be a part of our celebration, our youth-led, place-based nature solutions.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I want to wish you the best of luck, Emmy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this. Thank you for your time and all your thoughtful questions.
My guest has been Emmy Scott, Executive Director of Earth Guardians, and this is Rising Up for Justice. I'm SonaliKolhatkar, host and executive producer of this new weekly half-hour series exclusive to viewers of Free Speech TV and subscribers of my long-standing program Rising Up with Sonali. You can find out more at risingupwithsonali.com.